So, welcome to my talk about Vue 3 in TypeScript. And the question that we are trying to answer in this talk, are we best friends yet? And I think the answer to that is yep. I think Vue 3 and TypeScript are now a really great couple. And to just give you an idea what is possible and what changed in comparison to Vue 2, I will just start there and take you into a few code examples, show you a few things in the net editor, because that's where the developer experience happens, the experience that TypeScript can provide to you. And yeah, I hope you enjoy this. I hope you get motivated to try TypeScript in Vue 3 if you haven't already. And so let's get into it. But first of all, yeah, I'm Thorsten. I'm part of the Vuejs core team, and my cat is walking into the screen, but that's okay. And yeah, this is me when I was a little boy. You see, I already had swag as a little boy. I hope I still have swag now. But anyway, I only started using TypeScript like 18 months ago or 2 years ago, and I'm still trying to actually become a super expert. But I think TypeScript is awesome, and that's why I chose it as the topic of my talk. So before we start, just as an emphasis, this talk is not about learning how to use TypeScript with Vue. It's about demonstrating how TypeScript can improve your developer experience when working with Vue, and especially how it improved in the recent releases. So this is not a TypeScript introduction, and it's not about how to type what and stuff like that. It's more about the experience that we offer. So as a start, why is TypeScript popular, or how popular is it really? Well, just look at this chart from GitHub. JavaScript is undisputedly the most popular language in GitHub, but TypeScript is already on place 4, and it's just a superset of JavaScript, and it's already climbed up to the 4th place. So that should be an indicator that TypeScript is really popular, and a lot of people see value in TypeScript, and mostly, or not mostly, but probably in large part due to the developer experience that you can get when working with TypeScript compared to pure JavaScript. Another way to look at this would be this. These are the weekly downloads for the Vue package, and as you can see right now, we are about 2 million weekly downloads, which is absolutely crazy, because we started, as you can see in the bottom left corner, in the middle of 2016 with Vue 2 at, it's not even measurable, like probably 20,000 downloads a week or something. But if you compare this to TypeScript, this is actually huge, because TypeScript is over 16 million downloads, really. And that is absolutely insane. So you see, TypeScript is very, very, very popular. I've also read estimates that around 30–40% of all the packages in NPM, all the actually used packages, maintained packages, either provide their own TypeScript types, or they had types added via the definitely typed repository from Microsoft. So that's also a good indicator that TypeScript is really popular. And why is TypeScript popular? Well, this screenshot should probably summarize it perfectly in terms of the developer experience. Just by giving a few hints about which types you expect in the sum function, your editor can tell you, hey, you can't pass a foo string in there. It has to be a number. And this can also be checked, of course, at the build time. But the most direct experience of this improvement that TypeScript offers is, of course, in the editor. And you can, of course, say, well, why is it popular? Because it saves you from making mistakes. Not all of them, of course. You still have unit tests. You still need end-to-end tests, and you shouldn't skip tests just because you're using TypeScript. But you can catch a lot of errors while you're writing your code before you actually start your tests or before you go to production, and that is a huge advantage. So, Vue 2. Vue 2 was written in JavaScript, not TypeScript. It used Flow for specific parts of the code base where we thought having a few static types would be advantageous. And if you ask why Flow, if you even remember Flow, because back in the day when Vue 2 was written, TypeScript and Flow were like comparatively equal in popularity, and Flow was easier to integrate, so we went with that. But after that, TypeScript, of course, as we now can say, conquered the world, and consequently, people expected us to deliver types for Vue, and we put that on top of the actual JavaScript code base. And so types were required to be written manually. They had to be manually aligned with changes, with bug fixes, with features that we added in 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 releases, and so forth. That was error-prone and not always perfect. And what we also learned is that the Vue.js Vue 2 options API that you all know was actually not a good fit for TypeScript typing because everything is like indirectly mapped onto the this object. It's very hard for TypeScript to actually infer the type of the component. And also we had a lot of or some features like prototype extensions that are not really working well with TypeScript because they are kind of hidden. So this is the list that I already started talking about. Sorry for that. But typing the options RP is hard. For example, computer properties require a manual return type annotation. You have to actually tell TypeScript, hey, this computer property will return this type. And you have to do that because computer properties kind of have a circular dependency on the this type, but they also feed into the this type with their own return value. And TypeScript simply can't resolve this circular dependency of types. Injections from provide inject, they practically always require some type of typecasting because the way in which it was implemented is not really easy to type. Prototype extensions, if you have some plugin that adds a dollar method onto your component object, you have to provide some shims for that in the component just to make TypeScript aware that this is actually existing there, which is also not optional. And last but not least, mixins are a real nightmare with TypeScript because they just don't fit the TypeScript model at all. We will talk about all of these points again once we're in the editor in a few seconds. But this is just to give you a few points that you can think about why using Vue 2 with TypeScript was not a perfect experience. Another important point are single file components. Single file components are one file that contain both like the HTML for your component, the JavaScript for your component, and the styles. And single file components are awesome, right? Practically everyone using Vue loves them. There are also a few people who still prefer to use JSX, but I don't know why, but good for them. But TypeScript doesn't understand these types of files at build time naturally. So you can't run TSC in the console. When you are building your project, you can't just build it with a TSC. You can't just type check it with a TSC. And in the editor, the TypeScript integration of your editor also can't understand these files without help. The build time problem is not that hard to fix because we already have build tooling like Vue Loader and Roller plugin Vue that just have to delegate to TypeScript for the part in the script block. But the editor part is really the big challenge. And this is what we are going to be talking about in a second. Viter. Viter is the main extension from Vue.js for Vue.js developers, and it's a VS Code extension for Visual Studio Code. And using single file components without Viter is a bit like this, right? You're losing syntax highlighting, you're losing support to run ESLint, you're losing support to do like refactorings and all of that stuff. And Viter is an awesome project that is mainly run by Octave, and it adds most of these features back in, like formatting, syntax highlighting, running ESLint, and stuff like that. And also, it enables TypeScript in the script block. So Viter made working with TypeScript and single file components enjoyable because it supports TypeScript in the script block, and it also has limited interpolation support in templates. We'll talk about that in a second. And maybe something that you don't actually know, there's also a CLI tool called VTI which you can use to actually run in the command line and check your files with TypeScript. Instead of the usual TSC to type check files, you can run VTI to type check your Vue files, which is great for CI, for example. Running this command line looks a bit like this. So it tells you which files it checked. It tells you which error it found and in which file. So basically something like TCS does for you, right? So this is good, but there are some limitations in Viter. For example, the interpolation is limited to component properties, so the data, the computers that you have in your own component, and you don't really get any type information for the child components that you're using in your template. That is really something that people wanted for a long time, but we couldn't really figure it out for Vue2 so far. And it also, of course, can't solve the inherent problems of Vue2's types that originate from the options API. So to just give you more hands-on experience with these points that I was talking about, you can join me now as we go to the editor. And for that, we will have to look at a Vue file. And I will have to make this a little bit bigger, I'm realizing. So we have a component with a mixin, with an injection, with a component, with props, with data, with computed. And here's the first point, right? We have to actually tell TypeScript that this computer property would return a string. What happens when we remove it? We get this strange error that one computer doesn't exist. Well, it exists at runtime, but TypeScript simply can't deal with it. And so this is why we actually need this information for TypeScript to actually make it work. But there are other great things, like, for example, in the template, we get the information that message is actually a property from a component and is of type string. Similarly, for these other computers. But here we have a mixin computed, which seems to not exist. It does exist because it's from this mixin, but since this mixin is just a plain object, and even though we add it here, it's not really inferred as being part of this component. TypeScript doesn't know about it, so that's a real issue, right? There are, of course, ways to build extractions around this to make this work in a way, but they are not really good. And another thing that I was talking about is we have this component here, right? And if we click on it while holding the control key, we can even open that component that is working, and we see that it has a prop name of type string. But if we go back to our component, we see that we are passing a number, and it doesn't complain. So we don't really get any inference for the props of components that we are using in our templates. So another thing is we are injecting something of type foo, but if we were to use it, TypeScript would tell us, hey, that doesn't exist either. And so it's not really easy to type injections. It's possible, but I don't want to talk too much about it because we want to talk about Vue 3 now in a second. And so this is just to give you an overview that we actually have partial TypeScript support, so to speak, and we still have a couple of issues here and there with it. And with that, let me quickly get back to my slides. And that brings me to a Vue class component, because all of these problems led to the creation of a library called Vue class component. And the class component looks like this. This is practically a different syntax to write a Vue component by extending from the Vue class and decorating it with this add component decorator. Now, this has the advantage that a lot of the problems that I was talking about are solved by having a flat class API. For example, you don't need any return type annotation for the computer properties anymore, but there are other costs. You can, for example, have runtime overhead, because this is a library that actually has to transform this extended Vue constructor into an actual options object and then create a component, this is a one-time cost when starting the app or when using the component for the first time, but it adds up if you have a lot of components. Another point is that the API is very different, and since it's not like a core feature of Vue 3, but of Vue 2, but an extension, you will not find that many examples or tutorials or guides that are actually using that syntax, and so you have to still live in both worlds. Now, another problem is that it relies on non-standard JavaScript or TypeScript features, namely decorators. They are still in stage 1 or stage 2 or something, and so they may still change. They have been in stage 1 or 2 for years, and they are very, very they changed a lot in this time, and so we didn't want to rely on those because we want to have, if we were to make this API a core API, we want to have it actually supported in browsers as is, and not introduce something that may be dropped, that may never come to browsers, or that may come to browsers in a very different shape or form than the one we started supporting. Also, mixins are not entirely solved, even though there are extractions that make working with them easier. And in the end, we considered to introduce a class API by Vue 3. The RFC was dropped for multiple shortcomings, the ones mentioned and others that are discussed at length in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments in the RFC repository, which I will not going to link here because honestly, it's history. So enter Vue 3. What has changed? What is better? What are new things? Well, first of all, Vue 3 loves TypeScript. We actually rewrote Vue core and all of the official libraries. That means router, that means Vuex, that means utilities like Vue loader, that means utilities like the test utils. Everything was rewritten in TypeScript. So for all of these libraries, you're getting types that are generated directly from the source. There's no manual overhead to actually adjust these types or make them align with the current API. They just work. Also, Vue 3 introduced the composition API, which is a more function-oriented approach to write your components compared to the options API. And functions are very easy to type in TypeScript. So this API offers full TypeScript support for all Vue APIs and doesn't have any shortcomings. Vue class component still is supported, so we still have this package. It's updated for Vue 3, and you can continue to use it if you love it. But we would recommend to write new code, at least, in the composition API, because it simply doesn't have any of the shortcomings that the Vue class component still has. Also, and that is a very big point when we talk about developer experience, because developer experience is provided by the tools in our IDEs, and the tooling improvements on this front are pretty amazing. And there are two new projects that are currently exploring the space of what is possible if we approach this from different directions. One is VueDX, which is done by Zinc, aka Raul, a team member of mine, and he's also talking about this project, but he's talking about like the internals and all that nitty-gritty stuff. So if you're interested in that, make sure that you check his talk out. And there's Volar, which is a bit more focused on supporting the new script setup Sugar API that is still in RFC status and experimental. But those two both offer amazing developer experience in your IDE. And this is what we're going to be looking at right now. So, to the editor. So this was the Vue 2 editor. This is the Vue 3 editor. I will have to close this. So we start here. Again, we have a hello world component, similar or identical to the other one, just with defined component instead of Vue extend, because this is how we do it in Vue 3. We still have these annotations because the problem originates from the options API and is not resolvable by just rewriting Vue in TypeScript. But if you remove it, for example, you now get this. You get a better error message because it's actually telling you that you probably need a return type annotation for this. So that's an improvement. And there are a couple of these. Another thing that you can look at is that now we again have this goodbye component, and now we actually get a real type for it, not some weird, strange type. We get an actual type with a name property, with a message property, and with a type. So now we actually can see what the props for these components are. And consequently, if we don't pass the name property, which is a string here, namely Thorsten, if we change it to a number, our editor will tell you number is not assignable to type string. And you can actually do message, and we'll recommend you, hey, did you mean the message prop? You can write a message here. Well, that's pretty amazing, right? Something else, you can even, this prop doesn't exist, right? But this one does. Something else that you can do is you can actually hold the control button to get the type of the props. And if you just click it, it brings you directly to this prop. Isn't that amazing? Something else which wasn't supported before in Vitor is that we can now actually rename variables all over the file. But for that, I will go to the Vue composition API example, which is this. So here I have kind of the same component, but this time it's written with setup. So once again, we have one data, Thorsten. We have a message prop that we are receiving. We have a computer property that is uppercasing it, and we have another property that is adding this exclamation point. But now there's no this anymore, and we're just working with variables that are in the scope of these functions, and so we don't need any return type annotation. It's all just JavaScript that you can write, that you can return. And you're realizing we already started refactoring here a bit. We have an uppercase message computed instead of one computed, because that's a better name. And now we want to rename this. And so we use it here, we use it here, and we use it here. So what happens if we say rename symbol? We can say it now is named louder message, and it changed here, it changed here, and it changed here. So now you can actually rename variables safely throughout all of your Vue files, not just in the script block. And that's also something that you frequently have to do, and that is just super convenient. The last thing that I want to talk about is something like typing injections. Injections in the setup world don't work by having some option object that receives and just a string, but you actually have to call inject, and we can pass it a foo key. And the inject, still have to auto import that from the Vue module. And now we have an injection and we have a type for it. The type is bar or undefined because the injection could be probably missing. Where does this type come from? Well, it comes from this key. This key, if we go to it, is actually a symbol that we typecast as an injection key with a specific type, which is the type that the injection wants to provide. And so if we inject something with this key, we get type support. And similarly, the composition API doesn't really have the concept of mixins. Instead, you just extract the code that you have into a function and then call this function inside of setup. And that means you can, like we saw in the beginning with this simple sum function, you can type the arguments that go into the function, and you can type the return values or have it inferred, and it just works. There's no need to take care of any of the issues that mixins don't really know the context in which they are used or problems like that. It just works. This would be a very, very simple example because it doesn't even have an argument. But we could add it. We could say it receives the foo key here. Okay. And it is of type injection key bar. It's so hard to type on this far too big screen. Sorry. And if you use this, you also get the type, right? Because it's just a function. And so you can do this kind of abstraction, which is also, of course, much too simple here, but this is the kind of abstraction that will replace mixins. And since this is completely typable, because functions are very easy to type, you can create reusable pieces of code in the form of composition functions. So this was, I think, most of the things that I wanted to show you. Just to give you a hint that there are actual big improvements. They are the little things, but they are the important things. And so we will go back to our slides and do a quick recap. So are we there yet? Are we here? Are we in this scenario? Well, the current state of this DX tooling that I was showing you is that the current stage is still a stage of experimentation with different projects. Like we have the default Vitor, we have UDX, we have Volar, and the latter two are currently offering a little bit more than Vitor does. But they, at the same time, they are still in experimentation and development. There are bugs to be expected, but they are pretty much already usable. They will have frequent updates, but there's a lot of work going on. Things may change, so we don't have like the stage of a full-fledged stable solution right now, but it's not that far out. And if you are interested in helping out here, the maintainers would be very happy to get some people involved that are interested in continuously helping out here. The goal in the end is to feed back all of the things that we learned from all three of these projects into a kind of best-of solution, and to have like the best possible developer experience in hopefully any editor that supports language servers like VS Code does. And also, there's always more to do. For example, there's a typo. Vuex5's API is still not type-friendly at all, and it's still a typo. This is Vuex4's. So yeah, there's always more to do. Vuex4's API is still not type-friendly at all, but Vuex5's will be. My teammate Kia from the Vue.js core team has a talk about Vuex, and he probably will talk about a bit about this as well. Vuex5's API will be fully typable, fully annotated, fully type inferred. So this is, of course, another big building block in improving the developer experience with Vue 3 and TypeScript. And another little thing is these type errors in the template that I was showing you, for example, where I was passing the wrong prop. These are currently only really available in the editor or the command line check tool, but not really in TypeScript when you're building your project, because the template currently isn't run through TypeScript while building. We are just directly generating JavaScript. But there's also probably the new script setup, RFC, Sugar RFC, will probably change this, because there we are already using TypeScript to actually change a few things while we are compiling this new Sugar API into the actual setup API. But this is still in the experimental stage as well. But I think we are very close to getting the pretty much perfect TypeScript developer experience, and it's already at the stage where I would say that we are best friends with TypeScript. Because even in best friendships, there are still a few things that go wrong from time to time, or that are not perfect. But we are really like this now. And so this is where I want to end. And I just want to say, I'm not a TypeScript expert. I've been using it for like 18 months, as I said in the beginning. And what I can say from personal experience, maybe as an anecdote, is that TypeScript enabled me to really contribute more to Vue 3's core compared to my contributions to Vue 2 core, which were pretty much non-existent except for minimal changes. Mainly because TypeScript just helps me understand the code base. And we hope that the TypeScript support that we offer with Vue 3 will give you the same kind of boost that I received from TypeScript in your Vue 3 projects. And so this is where I end. Thank you very much. You can find me on GitHub, you can find me on Twitter, or you can come to chat.vuejs.org, our Discord server, and catch me there. I hang out there a lot. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the talk. I hope I motivated you to use TypeScript more. And yeah, see you later, I guess.